Hey everybody, how are you doing? This is another H to H chat. The fact that you are seeing this right now means that it's another Monday. It's actually the Monday after Thanksgiving, so we are all probably going a little slow. But
Except
I wanted
for our friends in the UK.
Except for our friends everywhere else outside the United States. You guys are lucky you do not have tryptophan right now. But we are definitely very excited to be back here, especially with a special guest, a very good dear friend of mine. Drew Neisser is here with us, and before I make a proper introduction around him and his new book, I wanted to say a quick shout out to Suzie McCarthy, my co-host, who is live from New York City. How are you doing, Suzie?
I am doing well. Just slightly across the river in Jersey City. I think Drew is closer than I am at this point. But I'm doing well. I survived the Macy's Thanksgiving parade, which, as we mentioned last week, we were a little bit worried about. So
Ooh.
I survived. It was good. No floats.
And you got up at like 4 a.m.
Yeah. It was very special.
That's hardcore.
It was my feet. My feet were frozen.
You got up when I was not even in bed yet.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and the issue, my parents were visiting from the West Coast, so we kind of got up at 1 a.m. their time.
Oh.
Yeah, it was. We all needed naps afterwards. It was.
Yeah.
I did learn next time, wear Uggs and bring a chair. Get there slightly earlier.
Where were you watching from? What place?
West 72nd.
West 72nd. Good spot.
Yeah, it was a good spot. We got to see everything. There was a little bit of, we almost kind of, it looked like Snoopy was gonna kind of hit us in the head at one point. So the entire crowd, woo, so it was fun. It was fun. So
we were on the other side of the trees in the park watching from there.
Oh, nice.
We got there at about 9:30, 10, watched for an hour. Never got cold. Was very civilized.
Civilized is the word, I have to say, but yeah. it was fun, especially, the little kids when Santa's coming. There's nothing like it. It was, it was adorable. And,
well, speaking of adorable, I wanted to introduce Drew Neisser.
Absolutely adorable. That transition, I think, best one we've ever had.
Yeah, that was used a lot. Thank you, Bryan.
Yeah, you got it. So we have a very special friend today, Drew Neisser, CEO and president of Renegade Marketing. And as Suzie just mentioned, he is in New York and was also at the Macy's Day Parade. Also just launched his new book, The CMO's Periodic Table.
I just happen to have a copy of it here just in case, Bryan.
And I just happen to have a copy here.
Nice! That's amazing.
I have my imaginary copy here.
Stop, Suzie. I would have sent you one had I known you weren't going to be there. I'll get you one.
All right.
It is called The CMO's Periodic Table, A Renegade's Guide to Marketing. It is a fascinating book, although I haven't had a chance to read through it because I just got it this morning. But I am in the book, so that makes it better. And I'm kidding, of course. And
no, you are in the book.
I am in the book. That is awesome.
You are in the book. I think I sent you the page. You're on page 128. It references shareology.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Now I will definitely read. No, I'm kidding.
That was bond.
There I am. I am. Further reading.
Further
Bryan
reading.
Kramer. Thank you.
Yeah.
Really appreciate that. But I want to talk to you about this book because it's really fascinating the way it came together. And you and we had coffee in, I think, San Jose or around where I live a couple months ago, and you were describing to me the process you went through to even write this book, which is 200, almost 300 pages.
Yeah.
So how did you write? Well, first of all, for anybody who doesn't know about this book, give them a high level. What is this book about?
Sure. So imagine there were 64 really smart marketers joining us on this chat right now, and we could ask them. You had half an hour with each one of them. Imagine how much you could learn from them. Well, that's sort of what this book is. But it's organized along a periodic table, which made it a lot easier to sort of look at basic elements that every sort of marketer needs to understand, to things that I consider transitional trends, to things that I would consider noble pursuits and inert fundamentals. So it's like, for me, doing all these interviews was like a Belkin mind meld with 64 really, really smart people. And I tried to make sure that that knowledge that passed to me found its way into the book. So each chapter is an interview aligned with a particular element in the periodic table, and then each one has, recommendations in terms of sort of key findings that you could get, and this is not a book that you read from cover to cover. This is a book, if you're a marketer, you say, I've got these 5 issues, and you go read about how did Beth Comstock do innovation at GE, or how did Tammy Cannizzaro get her influencer program off the ground. So it's not a theory book, but I think it's an interesting resource for folks in the marketing world.
When you were looking at everything that you had done over the past few years, and you were trying to think, how do I piece this together? How do the periodic elements, so to speak, come together? How did you pick what rose to the top? You can only do so many elements, and there are so many ideas and so many things you could do. So was it kind of research first, and whatever you thought was important you put in here, or was it a different kind of chemical mix? How did you do that?
Well, so it's a great question. It was some combination of the above. By the time I started writing this, I had already done over 100 interviews of senior executives across a wide frame. So I needed an organizational framework once I decided to write the book. So the periodic table was really good. Then I looked at the periodic table and assembled and went, oh, it goes from basic elements to inert fundamental. Great. All right, there's the poles for the book, and then I sort of filled in the middle, and then I looked at the interviews, and the best interviews, and the interviews that I felt had the most to teach. And so then I started aligning things there. I mean, the truth is, and that I didn't cover every element in marketing. There are some that are missing, and that'll be for the next, the second edition of the book. But it sure as hell covers a lot. And if you were new to marketing or just getting into the marketing world, and you said, all right, what do I have? How do I get started? How do I put a plan together? You could start in the basic fundamentals, and you would know kind of what to do. And if you didn't cover those, you really shouldn't bother reading the rest of the book, because you'll never have a chance.
Just flipping through this, I think my favorite to say is UGG. User-generated content.
Thank you. That's your. That's your
and
favorite
isn't
element.
that right? UGG. When you and you have Evan Green, the Recording Academy, was the interview for this chapter.
Yeah.
So now when you look at each of these different chapters, do you have something that you learn out of this that maybe you didn't see coming? Were you saying "ugh" a lot, or were you kind of going "aha" a lot?
Yeah. No, it was aha. It was a lot of ahas. And I have to say, if I didn't learn something from the interview, it's not in the book. I mean, I think each one of these has some instructive element, if you will, to it. Evan, in the example that you did, really has works for the Grammys, right? That's the other, and they have done an amazing job getting users involved. And he's very systematic about how he sets up the program, and always focused on the end user, which is obviously a good place to start. But he has some really good, helpful tips. So the answer is yeah, Bryan. It was all about the aha and how they did their, how they found their mojo.
And you have a mix. You have a mix of business. Actually, you have a mix of H to H.
Yes.
See what I did there? But you have business to business, and you have business to consumer. So,
yes.
Which is kind of interesting, because this isn't just a business book. There's so much relevant information for everything. So you're kind of switching back and forth, and it's a very interesting kind of three-dimensional book.
It is, and I think that's maybe a good news, bad news. I mean, I think the good news is that you don't have to be a marketer to read this. I think if you start at have a job, right, and you start at the most basic element, which is setting expectations. If you don't set expectations with your boss, you're probably going to fail pretty much no matter what. So you're right. That's that lesson, and most of the lessons in the basic elements are life lessons. I would also argue that the farthest over what I call, I have a giant version of this thing here, the inert fundamentals, things like passion and innovation. Those are pretty broad elements, and those are the things that I think separate the good CMO from the great. The ones Go ahead.
Can you show us that card, the giant?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
So this is a poster. Actually, this was Joel Combs' idea. Joel said I had to create this poster, and we did. In fact, we just mailed a bunch of these to marketing professors because we thought they'd have some fun bringing a little science and scientific organization to a field that is very difficult to organize.
That is awesome. That is awesome. I love the idea and how you can actually how it allows you to go through the book and kind of pick through either by person, by topic, or by genre or category. Now give me three of your own ahas. Three things that you walk me through three things that you heard while you were learning from these awesome. I mean, you have an American Express, you have Marketo, you have SAP, you have MasterCard, you have Kawasaki, Patron Spirits, Patron. Oh, my company, and maybe you can make that one of the three. Just kidding. First Tennessee Bank. You've got a lot of awesome companies in here, but tell me what three ahas you had while you're going through this.
So my first was John Yembrick, who is the head of social at NASA, and I don't know if you've ever seen him, the National Aerosonic Space Organization. I don't know if you've ever heard him speak, but he is among the most passionate presenters. And I had already conceived the book by then, and I saw him speak, and I said, "You have to be in my book," because it was so clear he brought tremendous passion, and to me the light bulb went off. It's pretty obvious, but he was so good and brought literally, I think that social media transformed perceptions of NASA. I mean, when I was growing up, you thought of NASA as the white guys, white shirt, black tie, sitting at a conference table presenting, okay, here's the space launch. And he was able to, through the passion that he had for science and astronomy and space, he was able to build an army of enthusiasts to the point that, and this is the moment that you just go, oh my God, what brand would this happen to? When the government shut down, the fans took over the feed because he wasn't allowed to post because the government had shut down. So you talk about building community and doing so in a way that is so infectious that people just want to take the ball and run with it. So that was John. So just the overwhelming need for passion, and that separated him, and just such a great reminder of really, truly successful people. It's a characteristic that most of them have. And so that was important to me. The Marketo one with John Miller, who was one of the founders, I think was almost on the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of, had nothing to do with passion. It had everything to do with the ability to manage a process, the marketing process, such that you could pay your sales guys less because your marketing leads were so good. And to me, that really turned the world upside down. And ironically, I mean, I think Marketo was better at using Marketo than anybody else, and they were able to literally cut the cost of conversion, increase the odds of conversion tremendously. And the result was they could pay marketers more and sales guys less because they were closing faster. So, those are sort of two extremes of the thing. One is an attitudinal, and the other is very practical, using marketing automation to get where you're going. And I think the third aha was with Beth Comstock of General Electric. Beth, she's in the always innovating category, and she was one of the real people behind GE's eco-imagination. And she had been thinking about this idea for a long time, but what was interesting about Beth is she's infinitely curious and doesn't expect to come up with the ideas herself, but she keeps finding information and keeps pushing, and she knew she was in some territory that was interesting, and then she just kept pushing various things to people and getting feedback, and eventually it became a $6 billion business, but it started as a kind of as a marketing concept. And that, to me, the way she went about driving innovation through marketing, I thought was truly eye-opening.
How did she do, like, what was the process? How did she actually go through that? Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, it was, I could summarize it quickly.
Yeah.
One of the things, she's on the road a lot. She's on the road, say 20 to 30% of the time, and she's constantly meeting with vendors and third parties and her Chinese development guys and her R&D guys. So she's like gathering in all this information, and then as she starts to see patterns that she thinks are interesting, then she builds a team around ideas and have them flesh it out and bring it to life, and is able to, once she has, like, let's take eco-imagination, as that started to brew, she would then go to the folks that could say, okay, how much product do we have already? What new product do we need to bring this to life, right? It wasn't just a marketing thing, it was I would call it a movement within GE that she was able to orchestrate. And I greatly simplified what she did, but I would say it comes down to intense curiosity, really keeping the wax out of the ears, and her ability to sort of see patterns as they were emerging, because she's always looking for them. And lastly, and I think you'll find this with anybody who's going for innovation, there was an ability and a willingness. She created an environment where people could fail, and there was an environment around her that could fail, so you could take a chance on innovation. Now, you're not going to, her way of mitigating risk is to make sure you pilot everything.
I have met her, and I completely see what you're talking about. I mean, she's just such a phenomenal lady, and she's done so much. That was really good overview there. What would you say was an outlier for you as you were looking through this? Something that because you've got a lot of really great major brands in here. I see you have Kieran in here from Belkin, and just some really, really cool stuff. But any outliers that just kind of didn't they kind of had an uphill battle from the get-go. They weren't the GEs of the world.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
I do, and I think one of my favorite story there would be Annie Matson from NEA Member Benefits. NEA is the National Education Association, and that's a nonprofit, and then there's a profit organization that basically markets to the members, right? So they sell lots of things, insurance of various kinds. And when she was there, they're basically, the brand was not particularly well liked by the members, because they bombarded them with contact after contact, email and direct mail, and what she was sort of touched by Forrester's presentation on customer centricity and said, I want to make this happen. I want us to become a customer-centric company. And she was really fighting an uphill battle, because this is a company, if you know that you can send out a certain number of direct mail pieces and it will yield revenue, you're going to say, I'm going to keep doing that, right? She was able to reduce the number of mailings from 50 to 6.
Wow.
From 50 to 6. increase sales by 20%, but most importantly, improve satisfaction among the members, because instead of sending everybody every offer, it was a specific group of people, say young teachers. We're not going to sell them necessarily life insurance, but they might need a mortgage, or there's some things that they might need at the young stage, and it seems obvious in retrospect, but it was a big, tough decision that she was able to sort of push through, and you don't often get the cases where someone does a radical change like that, and not only do business results improve, but perceptual results improve. So that was kind of an unexpected case.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that. I always love the outliers. Those kinds of people, those kinds of companies that take something like you just said, when you can take a risk and lower it down to 6.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty amazing. From 50 to 6, it's mind-boggling.
Yeah, and see everything else improve out of that. That's phenomenal. What would you say was the hardest part about writing this book?
So you and I have talked a little bit about interviews and interview books, and the hardest part of this was going back to all 64 of the interviewees. Because when I first interviewed, I'm going to say 40 of the 64, there was no book. This was an interview that I was doing for one of my articles. So I had to go back to all of them and say, yay, there's a book, it's coming, it's called the CMO's Periodic Table. And at that point, I didn't have a publisher. Trust me, it's going to be great. And it took over 3 months to get all of those folks to finally sign off. Oh, and by the way, I had to update, because once I assigned an element to them, a lot of my interviews were general, but if we were talking about a very specific element, I needed more on that. So we had to update, we had to get approval, and then the funniest story is one of the characters in the book is Sir Patrick, he's a knight of the Round Table. He's the knight, and from Tesco. He's the CEO of Tesco. It was a great story on courage. I didn't have his contact information. I had met him through IBM, right? So we had to track down an English knight. That was the hardest.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. But by the way, he finally got it. He loved it. He was excited about it. And of course, I referenced his book. Where is he? Why am I blanking on Sir Terry Lee? Great human being, I have to say. And he took an amazing. He's the guy who introduced. I think that's where you and I may have met, Bryan, at the IBM Amplify event.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, he's the guy who introduced basically the rewards card and the whole system at Tesco, which catapulted him from CMO to CEO. But as he put it, it took a little bit of courage. He was risking 25% of the company's profits when he launched the program.
Wow.
That's a big bet.
Yeah. And so he went from CMO to rewards to being a knight.
To being a knight. It's pretty cool. I don't think that's going to happen.
Big ROI.
That's big ROI. Yes.
That's awesome personal branding.
Yes.
We'd say that's a personal branding success story right there.
It is.
It totally is.
Yeah. Without tweeting once.
What would you say is one of the most challenging stories here? Something that really, you just talked about 25% betting everything to become, to putting your job on the line and building something out of nothing. Or you've talked a lot about that. But what was one of maybe the biggest risks that you've seen taken here in the book?
I'd probably say, so one of my chapters is on, it's funny, I have back-to-back chapters. One's called Agency as Partner, and that features Terry Funk Graham, who was worked with one agency for 19 years at Jack in the Box. The next chapter is called Changing Agencies, which is with Barbara Goodstein, and where she changed agencies. It was the CMO of AXA and then the CMO of Vonage, and so she describes basically how the agency is screwed. Not that you didn't already know that, but that is by far, by the way, the most honest you will ever read about that process. It was mind-boggling, and yeah. But Terry Funk Graham, who first thing she did when she introduced a campaign where they killed or they run their spokesperson over. They bring him back and then they run him over. It was quite a dangerous thing to do. And then she continued to break ground. Like one of the ads that she did featured a young man who is hallucinating, because a lot of Jack in the Box. It's the 3 o'clock run for the tacos when you're a little buzzed. Right? You may have been there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, and she tells a story of how they ran this ad, and of course there was immediately a protest group, because they thought they were condoning, young high school guys getting stoned and then going to Jack in the Box. So they were going to protest her. This is just a funny story. It wasn't the bravery was running the ad, but so they're all set to protest, and they're going to Jack in the Box headquarters, and Terry thinks about it a little bit and then decides to turn on all the sprinklers around the headquarters. So there was nowhere for the protesters to stand because it was just the water was flowing. And so they went away. There was no protest, which is just a hilarious story of quick-wittedness and bravery. But the real bravery for her was the ability to stick with an agency for as long as they did and continually break ground with incredible creative. And of course she left, I'm going to say 2 years ago, and a year after she leaves, they fired the agency, who had done this amazing work for 20 years. I think it takes a really brave marketer to stay with an agency for that long and then to continually do work that is edgy like that.
Wow, that's a really good one. You have so many stories and so much great content in here. What are there I guess action items, areas that people can take away? You said you could read this even if you're not a marketer. Areas that you could take away so like, okay, out of this story, this is what I need to do to make my world, my business better. How to apply to even non-marketers.
Yeah, I think we could pick almost any chapter in the book. I'm just looking at some of the, how do you set up a metrics program, or one of my favorite interviews I did was the last interview for the book, was on the Pedigree Foundation. So Pedigree, has the Dogs Rule campaign, and for a while there, they would give a certain amount of money for purchase that would go to dog shelters and help people adopt pets. It's a great program for Pedigree. Finally, they set up a foundation. It's a program that I've admired for a long time, and I was able to get Bo to talk about it. And just an example there is interesting. Is we all say, oh, well, that's a cool idea. They should set up a foundation. Well, it turns out foundations are really hard, and there's several things. If you're just doing it as a marketing ploy, don't bother. That's sort of rule number one. And number two, it needs to be able to sort of stand on its own beyond the brand, which again, it's Pedigree Foundation. And then three is, if you want to do it, the good news is it's well worth the benefits of doing so, because the goodwill generated can be enormous. So, in each one of these things, I try to have some key takeaways, but there are lots of things on like personal branding, how to do that, how to network effectively. There's great things on what to do when you go to an event. The guy that I interviewed there is Matt Sweetwood is a master at it. And he had several things that he recommends in terms of how to network and how to get the most out of your network.
And I'm going to play off of that here in just a second, but before I ask that question, everyone, I see questions coming in, which is great, because we are. This is going to be my last question to Drew, but before I turn it over to Suzie for questions, make sure that you pose questions on hashtag H2H Chat. I'm here with Drew Neisser, founder and CEO of Renegade and new author of the CMO's Periodic Table, a Renegade's Guide to marketing. Excited to be talking to him today, and please go ahead and pose your questions online. Susie's going to ask those in just a minute and take over everything. So, Drew, when you were just talking to me about networking, how to really network well, give us a couple key takeaways if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. So when Matt Sweetwood goes to the events, he'll never drink. That's one. So because it just gives him an edge, right? It makes him. It's easier to remember the names. He's very good at finding out about the individual. He asks lots of questions. If he can, before he goes to an event, he does his homework. So if he knows who's going to be there, he'll read up on them so that he can start a conversation, an intelligent conversation. He and I are different. It's funny, and he's obviously better at it. I tend to go to an event like that, and I find somebody I really like, and I just talk to them for a half an hour and get to know them well. He's more of a spend a couple minutes, get enough information, we'll set up another meeting another time. So I think it's a personal style thing. But he's, I think those are two. Let me see if I can dig up a third. It's hard when you have 64 chapters. I'm going to have to memorize all of these tips. Power. Let's see, Matt, 271. Let's see if I can find one other takeaway for you. Yes. And so one is just if you don't have a peer network, get one. And two, and Matt's really big on this, is networking is about giving to get, not getting to give. He is really good, and he did this for me at an event the other day. He just followed me around with a camera to help take pictures of people with my book. He didn't have to do it. It was just such a cool thing. It's such a great gift. And then lastly, it was a reminder that it takes time, and you have to commit to it. Just like, and if you want to do it well, you have to put in the hours.
Yeah, and it's interesting because everything you just said, you can apply a "that's what she said" to it as well. But I'm going to now go ahead and throw this over to Suzie, who is going to take some questions from the audience and convert them into real-world questions that you will be able to answer.
Awesome.
And so I'm going to stick around. I'll be jumping in from here and there, but I'm going to go ahead and pass the baton over to Suzie. Suzie, he is all yours.
Why, thank you very much. We are getting some absolutely awesome questions coming in here. So we'll try to get through as many as we can. Everyone, please, please, please keep them coming in. Even if we can't get to them all, I'm sure Drew would be more than happy to stick around or answer them throughout the day. Yeah. We have some great stuff here. So
yeah, see some of them. They're amazing.
All right, first one, Monica Smith-Mullen, great question. She says, what came up as you were writing the book, what came up most frequently as the most challenging activity for marketers? If you could pinpoint something.
And that's, one of the things that you discover in a book like this and doing all these interviews is there's no one size fits all. One of the things that the great marketers know which elements to pull from, but don't try to do, if you're at Papa John's, don't try to do that same thing at GE. So first it's an open-mindedness, that recognizing that your challenge is unique. I would have to say that measurement was probably the single biggest problem across the board. And you have this conversation, and even the marketing automation people will argue. But other than, if I had 60 of the 64 would say that measurement on a micro level, yeah, they can look at an absolute level and say, we did this and sales went up, but they have a very difficult time with measurement.
So what, kind of going into that, what was there any type of consensus? I'm thinking specifically when we get to social. Right, in terms of measurement. This is something we've talked about a lot in different H2H chats.
Right. How
there is no ROI of a tweet or post. What did you get some good pro tips? I'm sure you did.
Here's the thing that I got from some of these interviews and from some others that are not in the book is that the problem is when you isolate any marketing element. because we humans don't isolate our stimulus, right? We see an ad, we see a tweet, we see the product, we have all these things. So to try to isolate the impact of social on its own is probably not the right thing to do. There are good metrics that you can notice progress, but it's the sum of the parts. And so a couple of the clients that I talked to recently are just taking their whole digital team, they're putting the social team, the content team, and the buying team, even if they're a direct business, putting them all together and saying at the end of the day, we want to sell more product together, so we're going to move forward, and we're going to have these sub-metrics, but we're going to collectively agree. Because the minute you pull out direct marketing from everything else, direct marketers are always going to look good, right?
Yeah.
But why don't we Google search something?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we got stimulus from somewhere.
Right.
So
right.
So I think the problem is the isolation, and so the better marketers are sort of have the macro view of in the book, I think it was Antonio Lucia talked about 3 areas of metrics, sort of sales on the overside, brand health in the middle, and then some very specific ones. I'm sorry, brand health as a third metric, and then some micro measures. But you have to look at all 3. You can't just sort of rely on one. So there's your short answer.
I love that. I love that. I could not agree more. And this goes into a great question that Christy has. She wants to know, how do you get sales on board with this concept? With the idea of getting quality, she says, quality market disruptive leads. I want to play into what you just talked about, where marketers are combining everything together, right? So you also have salespeople who, as you well know, have a very different mentality, especially some of the old timers.
Right.
How do CMOs do that?
Well, it's funny. So in my conversation with Barbara Goodstein, who, when she was CMO of AXA, did the AXA Guerrilla campaign, which really was amazingly successful and visible given the amount of money that they spent on it. And by the way, sales and sort of leads and sales went up. And of course, so marketing would, at that moment, be able to take credit, but sales did anyway.
Right, of course.
Of course. So I think, and her response to that was, let sales take credit. Fine. Because really what matters to her is she knows that this program, that the brand is healthier than it was when she started, right? If I see the brand health metrics, and I would say that any marketer that doesn't track brand health is making some real big mistakes. Because sales can go up and down. Just lower your price, and you can get your sales to go up, right? So, or pay for an end dial display, and you'll get your sales to go up. But will your brand be healthier over the long term, so you can sustain a higher price? The answer is you can't know that unless you have brand health tracking. So the CMO and the salesperson, the thing that the CMOs need to do first is make friends with their chief financial officer. That's the first person, right? And then the second person is the head of sales.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah, I totally can see. So can you define what you mean by brand health?
Sure. So it depends on the brand, but things like the basic things are purchase intent. Obviously awareness, unaided awareness, purchase intent, likelihood to recommend, any of those sort of softer metrics. And again, it depends on the brand, because, for example, if you are Panasonic, something that would be important to you is I could consider it to be the cutting edge technology, right? That would be a brand health metric for them. But that wouldn't be for, Pillsbury wouldn't care about technology, right? But, cares about me as a baker, right? And so the brand health metrics vary by brand and by category, but they're all, you need some kind of tracking study in order to understand those. Because otherwise go ahead.
I was going to say, it sounds like what you're saying is, as a CMO, you need to have lots of brand self-awareness. really
Yes.
thinking through that. Is that
Oh,
that
exactly.
one thing?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So what was Jace Henry wants to know, what was the most surprising perspective you heard about how someone implemented a new marketing process? I know you shared some awesome examples, but if you can think of one where you were like, oh, whoa, that's crazy.
Let's see. I mean, there's so many.
I know it's kind of an unfair question,
It,
but
it is, and
we get to do that. So
yeah, so that's fine. Here's one that's closer to home to you. So I interviewed Richard Marnell from Viking River Cruises, and the topic was content marketing. And obviously, you would think that content would be an important part for cruises, right? You're thinking about going on a cruise. You would probably go and look at content, right? Well, what was surprising in my conversations with Richard was the role that content played proved not to be one of acquisition, but one that filled the gap between the time you purchase a cruise and the time you actually go on a cruise. And so you buy a cruise maybe 9 months to a year, sometimes 18 months in advance, and there's this huge gap, right? So the content, if you're going to France and there's a French cooking video and you go see that French cooking video, what you do is you go, oh my God, I'm so excited, I better tell 2 friends about it, maybe 5 friends. Maybe I could even get my friends to join us because I know they're into French cooking. So that was a big surprise to me in terms of the use of content as a way of getting current customers engaged and excited and help champion the brand.
I love that concept. That's just that makes so much sense, and you're establishing that relationship too. It's
Right.
I mean, what a great opportunity, right? You've already had someone locked and loaded, and now you have that relationship building time. That's awesome.
I just liked it because I think so much of content. One, I think most content is boring and useless. But if you think about why brands do content, most of them do it in the pretense of I'm going to get more customers. It's all I'm going to improve SEO. I'm going to improve it, and I think that's short-sighted. And Richard sort of over at Viking sort of proved that the case that there's a lot of ways that roles that content can play that can be really valuable. Again, though, good luck trying to connect that to sales. And I now have another surprise thing for you. So American Express. The chapter, the element there is marketing as service. The notion is that marketing can have genuine value in and of itself. So they have the open forum, right? They've been creating all this content for years for small businesses because they know if small businesses grow, they'll grow too, right? That's their basic business model. But if you ask John Hayes, a longtime CMO of American Express, hey, John, show the ROI of the open forum. Just, how much does it cost you and how many sales does it get? Not a chance. And he said it's a stupid exercise. You couldn't do it. And you would think it's American Express. They can measure all these things. So, but he knows it's inherently right. And it does show up in brand health.
Oh, I love that. I may just use that example next time I'm trying to justify a social strategy.
Yeah.
So I also want to give Julie Zeisman a shout out for also asking. She also asked what was the most surprising thing you personally learned. I think you just shared that. Was there anything else though, as a kind of personally that maybe you're taking to heart?
Let's see. I'm looking at my jumbo version.
That is epic. That is seriously.
Which is very helpful to me because there's so many things that I learned in this book that I'll give you an example. A lot of us don't spend time with crisis management, although I'm sure as a social, for social we all have crisis management plans, right? You go into lockdown mode.
Right.
But I did an interview with Doug Duvall, Sprint, and he told the story. You talk about a crisis. In his previous job, the CEO killed himself.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and so you suddenly, you suddenly have a new level of crisis. And he talked about how they trained for any crisis, and they had a very specific process and a chain of command, and they were ready, and they had done fire drills. And so, the surprising thing was, in this case, really, this is crisis management is not for amateurs. And that the first and foremost thing is you have to find out what was the truth, right? Before you respond, if you can, get as much facts as you can. And then, 3, having the fire drills and the preparation made it a manageable situation, and they actually got through that pretty quickly and pretty smoothly. But that, you don't think about marketers having to deal with that problem, but we do sometimes.
Yeah. Wow. That is quite intense, and I would say that fills the whole surprising aspect.
Yeah.
So I have a great kind of multiple kind of two-part question that I'm gonna summarize from Roshni Kumar, who is joining us live from India, where she's told us it is 2 a.m. So shout out to our diehard H2H chat fans. We absolutely adore you. So she's looking and she wants to know, how does the mid-level person support new talent and explain any mishaps to the senior management folks and the board of directors?
Oh, that's a great question.
Right? This is so. I'm thinking, how do we encourage all of this amazing, innovation? So the CMO has the great concepts, and then mid-management's a little,
All of that in one tweet. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, I'm very impressed with this.
Yeah, and I want to know, ask Roshni where she is in India. I was there a year ago. It was amazing. So the answer is, to any sort of risk-taking, or you'll find this in any innovative environment, it starts at the top. The CEO has got to give the CMO permission to fail. Okay, that's number one. And if you can't, then you won't see innovation. It just won't happen. So then the CMO, in turn, has to give his or her underlings permission to fail. And some of these organizations, and I can't remember which ones off the top of my head, but some of these organizations actually celebrate failure. And they will literally, on a monthly basis or with the town hall, a lot of companies have these town halls, they will get together and say, we had a swing and a miss, but it was a swing, and it was okay. And that was a shocker to me that they would go that far. But if you want an environment of innovation to happen, you have to be able to accept a certain amount of risk, and you have to celebrate it.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, and I love, we talk a lot about, being, doing your failures, fail fast, right? But I do love the idea. I feel like it's so important that there has to be recognition that, you're not going to stick your neck out on the line.
Right.
If you feel like, that's gonna happen. I have a great personal question for you from Carol Burgess. Carol, I have to figure out how to say your last name one day. Next time we meet up, I'm going to grill you on that, so I know I stop mispronouncing it. So she wants to know, as an author, at any point in the process, did you almost quit writing the book? If so, what or who got you back on track?
Oh, that's a funny question. So the answer is, I've been wanting to write a book for 5 years. The minute I committed to, the process went like this. In March of this year, a guy I had never met before said, why don't you make a book about your interviews? I went, oh, duh, right? I mean, it's like the emperor. So that was and then within 2 weeks I had the periodic table format, and then within another week or so I had the structure. And given the fact that I knew this was going to be the easiest book to write, I just plowed forward, and I committed to, I was going to get this done written by August, and so there was no looking back, there was no point. Now, I might have had doubt whether anybody would buy it, I had doubt whether anybody would publish it, and I did everything backwards, and I wrote the book before I even went to a publisher, as opposed to going to a publisher and saying, I have this concept. But there was no stopping me. And now I will say this, and this is a discipline of a writer. I have been writing, giving up a Saturday, pretty much every Saturday for 5 years. I'm used to doing this. So I had already had the time allotted that wasn't going to take away from work. So no, there was no looking back on this one. Maybe we'll see on the next
Very
one.
nice. Yeah, yeah. Well, I love it. I love the idea of just going for it, right? And having that information and just, sitting down and writing it. And I am, the discipline to take your Saturday and write. I need to train myself to do that. The moment, not happening, but one day. So let's see. I have a second question from Christy. She's throwing us great ones today. She says, any ideas from the CMOs, kind of building off on this idea of collecting together these amazing teams, right, digital marketing teams, on getting them to be more collaborative and see themselves on the same team, some greater than individual type of concept?
That's a great question, and I get into organization a little bit. Stephanie Anderson of Time Warner Cable talks about organizing and how to organize a marketing department. And I think that what she would say, and first of all, you have to have alignment. You have to have alignment on purpose, and you have to have alignment on, why are we here? What are we trying to achieve? And then if you want group alignment, then you need to have group reward. So I can give you an example that's not in the book, but very simple, is when Continental was in deep, deep trouble, the new CEO said, we're going to do two things: on time with bags. And if we show up in the top 10 of on time, and we get our baggage lost under 10%, everybody's going to get $100. They achieved that goal within about a month and a half.
Wow.
Because everything was aligned. Every single person in the organization knew exactly the two things: on time with bags, right? So it is a matter. This is where leadership really matters, right? We're all going there. We're going to go in the same direction. This is why we're going in there. And then if you're not on board with that, then you're either in the wrong job or wrong company. And so the culture of collaboration has to be there, right? And has to be rewarded.
So we heard something similar, kind of this plays in to what we were hearing about Sean Murphy, who just came out with the Optimistic Workplace. And part of this is very much the culture of collaboration. So I love how that's kind of feeding into now the marketing execution. For those of us who have been on the past chats. So Pay Compliment has a great question. Once again, getting back to kind of the practical side, says, when selecting an agency, how should clients ensure the right chemistry? So this goes back to one of the things you were speaking of with Bryan. So that relationship is so important.
Right.
What does
I would
CMO
tell you,
say?
if all the 64 chapters in the book, that was the most prescriptive in terms of exactly how to run a review process. And since she did it the same way twice, first she hired a consultant to screen it down to make sure that they got rid of the conflicts and they got the right size, because obviously you want an agency that's big enough to handle you but not so big that you would get lost. Those things, and then it's. The demand that it's not about the principles. I want to know who's going to work on my business, meeting with that team. And what Barbara insists on is a creative exploratory. So you go through that together. And, not everyone would agree with her. Certainly, folks on the agency side cringe when you hear that. I mean, you don't ask your plumber to come in and fix your toilet as a proof that he knows how to fix the rest of your pipes, right?
Right.
Obviously, we're not as good as but she fully takes advantage of it with the promise of big business, and and both times the campaign that helped win the business was the campaign that ran. So that's one way to know what you're getting is it's make them do the work first. Personally, I can't. We don't participate really in creative reviews like that, but big agencies live and die by them.
I love the idea of relationship building. I feel like that, in some ways, you can boil it together. I think so. I have a great final question. Thanks, Monica, for tweeting this in. She says, if relevance increases results, what do you see marketers doing to understand the customer and the customer experience?
Interesting. Well, you know what you find is, it's a good question, and what you find among a lot of great marketers is they're not at their desks. They get out there and they talk to their customers, whether it's B2B or B2C. They are asking, you know, they're doing ethnographies, and they're out there sitting in the kitchen and watching how they cook and use the utensils. They are not taking anybody's word for the need and the behavior, and I think that because they're so curious and they want to know, they don't just say, okay, you know, it's women 25 to 49, go. They really get to know these folks. I mean, I think personas have been part of that process that brands have used to get to know them. But you will find that a great marketer won't just stop at that persona. They'll actually have met somebody who fits that bill. So it's not some copywriter writing a fictitious person, but actually say, you know, Susie from New Jersey, you know, thinks this way. So I think that they are, they find the relevance by talking to their customers at length.
So the storytelling component is really big for them.
Yeah.
So do you see, kind of last question, my own follow-up question from this, you know, so do you think that the rise of social and the ability of social listening, do you see that providing them with them using that data? Do you think that's increasing it, or is that?
Oh no, and some of that's in the book, but I will say, so I was at a customer service summit about 3 weeks ago in New York, and these folks really blew me away, and I was on a panel with the guy who does social customer service for Hershey, and asked him about, you know, has social listening, how is it, what other than, you know, responding, what role does it play? He said, we're developing products as a result of social listening. And he told the story of how Reese's peanut butter cups, right? People on Twitter were asking for larger ones. So they said, okay, fine, we'll make a double size. And they were still asking for larger ones. So then they made half-pound ones, and they were still asking for. So finally they made a full pound a peanut butter cup, and they initially just sold it on the website, and the folks said, hey, I want distribution. So ultimately now they have like national distribution, all as a result of social listening and just the understanding that the market will want it. Now what helped was that they kept track of all those people who were advocates, and they could go back to them and say, hey, by the way, thanks for that great suggestion. We now have the half pounder or pounder. So they closed the loop, and those people felt like, oh my God, Hershey paid attention to me. They introduced, I mean, they were so, another example of that is the folks at Microsoft are listening in real time for product stuff, and they're fixing on the fly as a result of what they're getting feedback. And the other side, for the latest Windows introduction, whatever the name of it is, I'm not a Windows guy, they had a social person on the product development team.
Really?
Said, yeah, it blew me away.
No kidding.
If you do these things, you will cut back on complaints like 90%.
Wow.
And they did it.
Wow.
Cool, right?
All right. Now I'm going to have to test it. I think it's Windows 10, which tells you just how awful Windows 8 was. They didn't even want Windows 9. I'm serious. I'm pretty sure I read this someplace. They were like, we don't even want the association. So that's such a great example of learning from their mistakes, because I mean that was a catastrophe.
Yeah.
Well, that's so fantastic. Thank you so much, Drew. I can't wait to get my hands on your book. Seriously, awesome. My invisible one.
Yeah, I'm telling you.
Awesome, please.
Yeah.
All right, Bryan, back to you.
Hey, Drew, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it. The best question we can ask you, I think that everybody needs to know, is where do they buy their book?
Oh my gosh! Well, they can buy it on Amazon. I think they're shipping on Friday. My website for the book is cmobook.com. Makes it really easy. You can buy it on Barnes & Noble. You can buy it on my publisher site, Peach Pit. And I think that it is going to be the perfect stocking stuffer for just about every aspiring marketer out there.
Good, good.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely wanted to congratulate you for completing a book. It sounds like it's been in the making for 4+ years, and at least on paper. And so I know the process is long and arduous, but congrats on making it to the finish line.
Thank you.
Or at least to the point where you can now market the book,
exactly.
which is the other 50% of the job.
Yeah.
But there you go.
Nice.
So who said human?
It was implied.
Oh, okay. So thank you so much to everyone out there. Really appreciate you joining us, Suzie and I. Really appreciate everything that you do to make this a community of questions and comments and back and forth. And we're always really looking forward to hearing from you. If you have ideas and suggestions on who you'd like to see, please tweet us, email us, send homing pigeons, bat signals, whatever it is you would like to do to let us know who you and what you want to see on H2H Chat, because this is all of ours to help make sure that our Mondays at noon Pacific Standard Time belongs to all of us. Finally, Suzie, thanks for joining us once again and co-hosting. Who do we have coming up on Monday?
I have it this time. I am so proud of myself. We have Terry Locke of Black Hawk Network. We're going to be talking about awesome stuff based on what she's done some amazing things in terms of gift card programs and doing a lot of listening to what exactly the customer wants and bridging the gap between customer expectations and retailers. So I'm really excited. I think it's going to be a great one.
And I think there's reports and topics around the holidays specifically with gift cards that will make it even more compelling, being that we are just going into the holiday season. So that'll be a lot of fun. Thanks, Suzie, for that. And to everyone out there, we will see you next Monday. Drew, once again, cheers and congratulations to you.
Thank you, Bryan. Thanks so much for having me here. It was a lot of fun. Hi, Suzie. We'll see you soon.